In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the radiator support on this Ford F-150. Let's get started. For this job, we're going to have to disconnect the battery. So take a 8mm wrench or socket and loosen up this mounting nut. Once it's loose enough, you should be able to wiggle the negative terminal off, set it aside so it doesn't touch the battery terminal. Typically, what you'd want to start with is removing the plastic cover that covers all of this. Well, in our case, it's missing, but it should have 6 push clips. One here, 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 and here, 3 on each side, and then you would pull the whole thing right off. Continuing from that, there are 4 10mm screws. They screw into the upper radiator support and hold the fuse box in place. Once again, 10mm, remove all 4 so we can push this fuse box back and off of this support. Pull this up and push it back. You can use a bungee cord if you want to tie it out of the way. On each side where the headlight is, you'll see a rubber shield. Let's disconnect that. There's a push clip here that has a screwdriver cutout on it, a Phillips head screwdriver. Sometimes you're able to unscrew it, and I say sometimes because over time these break and then you have to just pry them out. The threads on it become not usable anymore. So in our case, it looks like it works. I'm going to leave this into the shield like this, pull the shield down, and then there's this one over here on the radiator support. Use a trim tool to get this one out. These are the ones that we actually have to remove, but like I said, I just want to pull the whole shield off. There's one more at the bottom here, and you can use a trim tool to get to all these. And there we go, pull the shield away, and we'll do the same to the other side. Behind that shield, a 10mm bolt is hiding. Remove it. And on top of the headlight, 2 more 10mm bolts. They're all the same. With those off, the only thing holding this headlight in are 2 clips on this side, which I'll show you in a little. But to remove it, you want to pull it out. And the best way to do this is to just yank it all of a sudden. That'll break these clips free. There's not much you can do to get back there. There we go. Try to pull as straightforward as possible. Because of the shape of this headlight, it has a tendency to pull sideways, but try to keep it going straight because the push clips go straight back. So you want to pull them straight out to release them. And these are them right here, this one and this one. As you can see, they just snap into the fender. Now from the back side of this headlight housing, unplug all of the bulbs. This one is a different headlight for me, but the connector is the same. So just unplug it and unplug this one as well, set it aside. Here in this area, we have to remove a few things such as the horns, the hood latch cable, and this temperature sensor. Let's start with the hood latch. It's got 2 little clips, or tabs, I guess, that lock it in. If you just press those, you should be able to slide the cable through, up and over, and unhook it. Pop it off of this radiator support. While I'm here with the trim tool, I'm just going to pop this off and set it aside. I'm not going to disconnect the hood latch cable off of this. I'm just going to take off this whole retainer off of the AC condenser bracket, and I might as well unplug the horn assembly now. We can set this aside, and with a 10mm socket, remove the horn assembly. Tilt it up and out. There's an 8mm bolt down there that holds the fan shroud onto the radiator, and then a 13mm bolt at the top holding the radiator onto the radiator support. On the other side, you have the same exact thing. That one's tucked in there, the 13mm, and then the 8mm is all the way down there where you can barely see it. We have to remove all 4 of those bolts that I just mentioned to free up the radiator and the shroud so it can slide down just a little bit. There's one. This was the best view that I could give you. And here's the other side. There it is. And for the big 13mm bolt at the top, just push this line out of the way. Okay, there it is. And other side. There it is. Now let's remove the hood latch, take those two 10mm bolts off. And over here, pop this cable out. Let's remove this rubber insulator here. It's got push clips all along. Just pry them out with a trim tool. For me, all the push clips stayed in here, which is actually better because when I install it, I don't have to put them back through here. I just line it up and press it on. On each side, you'll see a 10mm bolt that holds this bumper cover onto this support here. Take it out and do the same to the other side. Also on both sides, you have the impact sensor here, bolted on with an 8mm bolt. I'm going to take this off by hand with a wrench. You can use a socket and ratchet if you want. But I don't want to cause any unnecessary vibrations to it because this being the crash sensor, it is a delicate piece that has to do with your airbags and I don't want to damage it. Set this aside. Looks like the wiring is also secured here. So I'm going to try and pop this out. There we go. And do the same to the other side. There are two of them. On each side at the top, you'll have a 13mm bolt. Remove it. And down on the side, two more. Remove both of those as well. And let's do the same to the other side. Down in the center by the hood release lever, you'll see two 8mm bolts that we have to remove. Now I'm going to show you from this side, from behind the headlight, because it's going to be a lot easier to see than if I were to show you from the other side. We have to remove all of this hardware here so we can pull the plastic bumper cover out away so that we can unhook it from this radiator support. You have a 10mm bolt here, one over here, two mounting nuts here. The top one you can't really see, but you can get to it from the other side. And then there's two more 10mm bolts down the line here that we'll have to take out. So let's remove all of those. Doing that allows us to pull this fender flare out, pull this piece down and away. You want to lift it up from the bottom like that, pull it forward, and over here it's got a tab on the back side that has to be pressed down, and if you pull this forward, there you go, lift it up and away. And this just unlocked it from down here on both sides. If we didn't do this, you'd fight this area. It would actually get completely stuck in there and you won't be able to remove that support. So just so that this doesn't fall down, I'm going to remove it and set it aside. You don't have to remove it, but like I said, I don't want it falling down. And now we have to pull this forward. We're gonna have to lift the radiator up and push it back because on both sides, this supports the radiator at the bottom. So lift this up, pull this out, do the same here. And there it is. We do have to transfer some things over, so let's do that. One of the things we have to remove are these upper radiator support bushings. You just have to slide these out of their spot and make sure when you put them on the new one, you put them in the right orientation. I'm going to take both out. Next, we have to remove these retainers that the headlights screw into. There are two on each side. They have some clips on the side right here. All you have to do is pinch them. They will squeeze in, and then you can press this clip through. There's another one right here. Let's do the same thing. For this one, I'm going to grab two pry bars, one to pry out and the other one to squeeze the tabs in as I pry out. Looks like I only had to squeeze in one side for this one. Comes out the other side, and there it is, and we'll do the same to the other side. On the passenger side of this support, there will be one more of those clips here with the threaded inserts. This is for the crash sensor that we unbolted. There it is. And if you flip it upside down on the bottom, you'll see one more. Let's get this one out as well. Okay. Now do the same to the other side. Grab the new piece and let's snap these in. This time it's a lot easier because they go from the top down. One more thing to remove are these bump stops for the hood. T30 Torx, one here and one on the other side. Unscrew both of these. And there it is. Do the same to both sides. And we actually have to transfer the plastic inserts over as well. To get these out, you just have to pinch them on the back side and they should pop right through. They have a split down the middle and squeezing it will allow it to unlock. Do the same to all four, two on each side. To put them in, just like for the other clips, go from the front, line them up, squeeze them in, and make sure they're locked. Reinstall these hood bump stops. I'm going to start both of the screws in, but we have to tighten up this one on the back side first. This one, as you can see, is adjustable because the bracket is slotted, but this one is not. The screw fits in perfectly, so this one on the back will basically dictate where this lines up, and then we'll tighten this one. They're screwing into plastic, so make sure you don't go too tight. Perfect, and do the same to the other one. This 7mm bolt right here has to get transferred over because it holds a plastic pin on the back side. I'm holding that with pliers. There it is. Make sure we put this on the other one. This piece helps center up this cross member as we try to slide it in to the frame. Bring the new piece over and line these up. I'm gonna hold the bottom with pliers and tighten up the top. It doesn't have to be perfectly positioned to how the old one was, but it has to be in here because as you push this in, that pin will line it all up. Now bring this radiator support over, line it up, make sure none of these wires are getting pinched and caught. Lift it up and slide the radiator into the mounting bushings, just like that. Come over to the other side and do the same thing. Ensure that the radiator is fully seated. It looks like it is on this side and it is on this side. Push this in, it all lines up, so let's bolt it on. Put back all the mounting bolts, make sure they thread on. All the holes should line up perfectly at this point. For me, they do. If for you they don't, that means something isn't seated right. You need to either take this back out or move the radiator around and make sure that this is mounted nice and flush up against the frame. I'm going to snug these down, then I'll come back and torque them. I'm not going to tighten these top ones first. I want to tighten the two bottom ones on each side first to press this support right up against the frame. I'm not worried about it being too high up because the weight of the radiator is pushing it down. So it's definitely seated height-wise. I just want it to be seated this way. So here we go. Do the same on this side. And now I'll tighten the top. The torque for all of those is 22 foot-pounds. And that's installed. Now let's put back everything that got attached to this. I'm going to start with what I ended, and that is this piece right here. Try and slide it over. Try not to scratch your paint. You have to pull this fender flare out. Make sure that this hooks on behind the support brace here. At the same time, you want it into the radiator support. Just like this. It will require some force and persuading. Okay, that's in. And line up the fender flare. Perfect, everything is lined up. That's locked in. Let's get these two center bolts attached. That's going to keep this piece from moving. Perfect. Next, I'm going to attach the bumper cover to this radiator support over here. On those two brackets that had to snap out, do this to both sides. Let's reattach the fender flare now. Put on the two mounting nuts. Snug those up. Don't make them too tight. You don't want to snap this piece. And now let's just put back all the other fasteners that went here. This side's done. Let's do the same to the other side. Now let's reinstall the headlight. Make sure all of the connectors click in. Okay, line it up. Tap it into place. It's locked in, so let's put the bolts in. Two at the top. And one down here. Now let's put the airbag sensor back. This washer went on the back side here, and the bolt went through. Line it up. In this new radiator support, it's going to have to cut new threads as you screw it in. Just keep that in mind. It will be more difficult than normal to tighten this up. As you tighten it down, make sure that this sensor lines up like that. I'm just going to secure this harness so that it stops moving around. Okay, and now hold it in place and finish tightening this up. Make sure that's nice and snug and this doesn't move around. Perfect. And do the same to the other side. Take this piece, line up all the push clips, press them down, and lock it in across. Line up the hood latch and start it in. These bolts also have to cut their own threads. There we go. Resecure the hood latch cable over here. For these bolts, I'm going to thread them in before I put the fuse box back in because this will give me a little bit more room and it'll allow me to use power tools as opposed to just a ratchet by hand. And over here, let's resecure this harness. Moving up, resecure the ambient air temp sensor. Resecure the hood release cable, and let's reconnect it. To do that, all you have to do is just slide it right back in. Let's mount the horns. Make sure that's nice and tight. Plug these in. Resecure this power steering line at the top here. Let's get this resecured. Secure it onto the headlight. And on the sea condenser bracket, this is going to be the tricky part because you have to squeeze your hand back here and press the push clip on. There you go, make sure it's seated all the way. Okay, perfect. Make sure they're all secured properly and do the same to the other side. Right here, had a 13mm headed bolt. Line that up with the mounting bushing. Try to thread it on by hand as much as you can. And I'm just going to use my ratchet to tighten it. Before I completely bottom this out though, I'm going to pause right here. I'm going to put the other side bolt in so that I know the radiator is lined up on both. This one's a little bit easier to reach and it lines up perfectly. So that's great. Start it in by hand. This one starts in. Now we can tighten up both. I'll just continue with this one since I'm here now. There we go, that's bottomed out. Another 1/8 of a turn, that's it. You just want this to hold the radiator onto this bushing. Don't crush anything. Same on this side, you don't want to damage the radiator by crushing it completely. All right, that's nice and snug. Let's resecure the fan shroud onto the radiator. Start the two 8mm bolts. Just like with the radiator, you don't want to tighten this past the point where it's snug because it can actually break the fan shroud, or worst case, the radiator where the fitting is, or that J-nut, and you don't want to damage either of those. Those need to be tightly secured onto each other. Okay, so that's snug right there. Give it a little extra, perfect, and we do the same to the other side. Let's resecure this fuse box up on top here, line it up. Start in all of the mounting bolts, or I guess screws. They're pretty coarse threaded. Tighten them all up. All right, so with that tight, if you had another cover that went up here, I don't, mine's missing, you would put that on at this point. Now let's reconnect the battery, put it on. It might make some noises and potentially a little spark. That just depends on how many things are trying to run at the same time. Use the same 8mm wrench or socket, tighten it up, just make it nice and snug. What you're going for is not to crush this completely, but just enough to not be able to move this around. That's perfect. Also make sure it's bottomed out all the way. You want it flush with the bottom, not flush with the top.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.